Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel, Fish Den 365. I'm Den Haring, and today I'd like to talk to you about jig fishing. So I'm doing this video out of my car at the moment because it's so dang hot out there. I figured I'd get some air conditioning while we do the video. So, you know, I really like to fish jigs and pitch jigs. It's one of my favorite ways of fishing. And one of the lakes that I fish, Nakamixon, has changed when it comes to jig fishing over the years. There was a time where a jig was the bait to throw there. I mean, it was just a great bait. It caught a lot of fish and it caught big fish. And, you know, I'm going back into the 90s where fishing with friends like Joe Zohill and John Tosca, and we were throwing large, bulky jigs and pitching into the weeds, pitching into the brush piles, and that caught a lot of fish. And over the years, I think that the bite has changed. For one thing, back then, when they would eat the jig, a lot of times it would be thunk, and you'd feel them just suck it in. They fell fully for it. And over time, as we fished these jigs, we had a lot less of those thunk type bites and more of the just what we would call a pressure bite, where it's just picked up and the fish just hangs onto it and you feel the weight as you try and retrieve it back. So that was one thing that changed, and as time went on, it just seemed to get harder to catch fish on jigs. And I think that this is probably due to fishing pressure. The lake is tremendously pressured, and so what do you do when that happens? You can still catch them on jigs, but there's some things that you may want to consider to make the fishing a little bit easier and better for you. Number one is to change the type of jig that you're throwing and come up with a simpler, more compact version. Lately, I've been throwing this. This is an old school lure here. It's a Gary Yamamoto hula grub. This one's baby bass colored. I just take a jig and take the skirt off of it completely. This is a stone jig, a man's stone jig. They don't make this anymore, but I have a ton of them because I liked them and I bought a bunch of them. This is a 1/2 ounce. That's what I like to throw primarily. And I just put the hula grub on there and I like to pitch this around. And it catches fish very well. Now, it's always been known to be a good fish catcher, this hula grub on the jig. You can throw it on a football head. You can throw it on an Arky style jig. All of these things work. This one I like because I can fish this in weeds, but I could also have it come through wood and brush piles, and it comes through rocks quite well too. So that's why I like this hybrid type of jig. But you can throw this same hula grub on other styles of jigs and do just fine with it. And this was always known to be a good fish catcher, and it still is. It does catch a lot of bass, and it catches some big ones as well. Maybe not as many large fish as some of the other big jigs that we used to throw, but in today's environment where you have this pressure, this jig tends to get you a lot more bites, and it'll get you some big bites as well. Primarily, I like to throw it in weeds and weed beds when the weeds start getting thick and when they start coming out deeper. And today's lake, that, you know, Nakamixon, that takes those deep weeds don't really start developing real well until September. Back in the day, you know, in June you had these beautiful weed beds that would go way out into, you know, 9 feet of water. Now it takes a while for those weeds to come up and in. But I like to pitch this in the holes in the weeds. It's a good way of catching fish. And I like to throw it around fallen trees and brush piles and woods. And this also works really well over rock, especially if you would put it on a football head. This style bait looks like a crayfish, or it could look like a bluegill to the fish. And I've caught a ton of bass fishing this over rock as well. And talking about fishing over rocks, that leads me to the next thing that I like to do, and that is fish a swinging football head jig. This is a Dirty Jigs swinging football head, and I've paired it up with a Zoom Z-Craw, and these tails kick, and you just throw this out there, you let it go to the bottom, and you just reel it in, and it's bouncing on the bottom. And because this is free swinging, it has a lot of action, and these tails are kicking. A good imitation of a crayfish. This particular color I really like. It's California something, some number, California 420, something like that. It's the only bait, it's the only color with the word California in it. So if you find that, you found the color. But it's a good color for me at a lot of the lakes that I fish. And so this is a lure that I like to throw out there. Just let it go to the bottom. I like the 3/4 ounce, especially if I'm fishing anything deeper than 8 feet, 8, 12, up to 20 foot. I'll throw the 3/4 ounce. Anything below 8 feet deep, if I'm fishing shallower, I'll throw a 1/2 ounce. But this is another bait that catches a lot of fish. It's a simplified version. It's a jig, right? It still has, you know, it still fishes like a jig, but it's a little bit different than your standard jig with the big bulky skirt. However, if you do want to bulk this thing up, you can. All you have to do is take the Z-Craw off and slide a skirt up on the hook and let the skirt come up to the head, and it'll still free float and you'll have a skirt there. I like to use Jan's Netcraft's turbo flare skirts to do this, and I will show that again. I've showed this in past videos, but I'll show it again in an upcoming video as well. Nice chunker. So that's the focus of today's Fish Den 365, 2 simplified jigs that still catch fish and can catch very large ones as well. I'm sure these will work at more than just Nakamixin. I throw these baits at other lakes as well, and they do well there too. And if you want to see another video that goes into detail about fishing this particular swinging football head, especially at Nakamixin, take a look at this one right here. And until the next video, keep it tuned. See you on the water. Be safe out there, and may God bless your fishing endeavors.